Welcome to the Decolonial Dialogues Podcast, where diverse voices from decolonial and anti-colonial scholars, activists, grassroots movements, and more share thought-provoking conversations and analysis. Today, we have the honor to interview the historian, political scientist, activist, and public educator Françoise Vergès. Growing up in Réunion in Algeria and in a family of anti-colonial and communist feminists, surrounded by activists, she learned early on that the laws of the state should be used against it, but that this strategy should always go with a critique of the state itself and its institutions. In this interview, we discuss how race, gender, and class define who cleans the world and who can enjoy that. We also go over an intriguing debate on how white or civilizational feminism failed the quest for freedom, and how it is much closer to the patriarchy than to liberation than we may assume. We discuss labor, immigration, religion, the radical left, and much more. Tune in and follow us in your favorite platforms.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me. I'm very honored. What can I say that will be what matters to people who are listening to us? To say that, effectively, as you say, for me, my life has been a constant political education. To also question things that, I was sure about at one point, and then they are being questioned, to listen, to be constantly open to what people say around me or what they do, and that, I did not think about that, or I did not see things like that way. And effectively, I grew up in Réunion Island, and this is where imperialism was, in fact, not something to find in the books. It was there as a lived experience. The way also I understood the state as a repressive institution quite early because of what I saw against my parents, but also what I saw around me, the French state. And we were, I'm not talking about 19th century, I'm not that old. I'm talking about the 70s. This has remained, how can I say, how colonialism, imperialism, capitalism fabricate consent and fabricate vulnerability racially along racial and class line, and how the resistance concrete and also in many forms are also built. So what I could say that quite early I understood that there is not a day where people do not resist somewhere. That resistance has always been there, that we learn in history about the big moment, the big revolution, but in fact every day, everywhere in the world, in every part of the world, people resist. And that was a lesson that I have, that for me has remained extremely important, that there is no constant, that there is hegemony, but is not total, is never full hegemony. Never. Well, again, my mother was a feminist, and she was involved in the Women's Union of Réunion, which was close to the anti-colonial Communist Party. And she took me to the meeting where she was going to. And it was just, to observe. So I'm not saying that at 6-year-old I understood everything, but what I saw, it was effectively how what colonialism and racism were doing to women. Women of color, women of the global south. And also the difference between women in France and women in Réunion, even though Réunion was part of the French Republic, was a French department. So this was just open my eyes, not just look at it, but understanding, making sense of what I was looking at. And I was also very encouraged by my parents being what I wanted to be, and not in the neoliberal sense, be all you can be, kind of, the U.S. Army saying, but also of standing for your for yourself, really. And so that my feminism was in fact a lived experience, to which I had its theoretical, theory and other things, but for instance, I never read like most of the French women, Simone de Beauvoir, and got suddenly, a flash. Oh, I understood. It was No, it was before that. So that was my understanding, and quite early also, I made a distinction between the feminism in the global north and feminism in the global south. I was also my uncle was a lawyer for the Algerian fighters during the Algerian War, and he defended women who were condemned to death by the French state. And this woman, as I was a little girl, was for me the heroine of my childhood. They were Muslim, they were women, so they were seen as by European, by the West, with these are passive women and oppressed and Islam. I mean, we know what is being said, and they were taking arms. They fought. They were arrested. They were treated as badly as men. There were no difference made, even, but also the torture were especially, of course, directed against them. So systemic rape, systemic, like form of torture. So for me, this was talked at the table, and I knew about it. So and for me, these were my heroine. I was extremely admirative of who they were, and so that was my feminism also. These were my hero, and also the woman of the Black Panther Party, because as I say, it was an activist home, so we were receiving newspaper from all over the world. My parents were receiving. So I was reading journals and magazines, which were not the thing that you were reading usually, and absolutely not what I would have been reading at school. So through this journal, I was reading about women in Cuba, for instance, after the Cuban Revolution, or women in the different struggle in Angola and Mozambique. So these were, for me, these were the face of my feminism, of my teenage years, and then after it transformed. But for instance, I didn't. These were, really for me. Not only what I admire, but what I wanted to be one day. I often make that remark that, for instance, in the 18th century, 19th century, many white women did not have a lot of rights. They did not have the right to be lawyers or surgeons or teachers, and so it's quite late in France, but even elsewhere. But the narrative of that gender equality narrative is about also the right to vote being really that should be. And in the meantime, what I always say, 18th century, perhaps these white women did not have many rights, but they have the right to own human being. They have the right, to have the property, the private property. They were at the head of plantation, or they were owning, human being as enslaved. And they understood very well that this was capital. They understood very well. So in the archive, you find, for instance, in the contract, when they were marrying a white man who had a plantation and had also owned a human being, they were very clear to say, this human being belonged to me, not to my husband. So if something happened, with the husband, or even the husband died and the son will, inherit, she will have that capital for her. She will not be deprived of that capital. So they knew, they were very savvy at the slave market. So they understood. So they were not passive victim of patriarchy. They were also, complicit of what was happening. There were also many European women also were for colonization, the post-slavery colonization, by thinking that this was good because it will bring to this woman lost in some kind of backward society. They will bring, what was modernity, what was to be modern. And you'd find text by some of them who are absolutely defend colonization by saying, and even saying we should be more in fact, becoming more active in the colonization, because men do not understand very well all this part or that dimension of civilizing the woman. Of course, you had also, we have to say in the West, also Marxist feminists, revolutionary feminists at the same time, during that moment. But as you were saying, the narrative that dominate was the narrative of rights, women's right, understanding the bourgeois way of being effectively able, to inherit as well as the son, and or also to be equal to the husband and to be able to work. But as I say again, some women were absolutely capitalists in the sense of owning business, owning capital, and being able to, manage within this terrain of capitalism. The bank, the insurance. I mean, they were not just pure, poor passive victim. Which does not say that there was no oppression. That's not what I'm saying. But we have to also see the bourgeoisie, the white bourgeoisie. So it's not just women like that, and also the way in which the Western power was savvy enough to give something even to women from the popular classes, so they will feel, superior to non-white women. The whitening of the working class, the whitening of women. So even though, for instance, they could be exploited, but they were a little above the non-white women. So the race cuts through Western feminism from the beginning. And so the fact that they say we are the victim of men, we are, dominated by men, allow them to hide the fact that in which way they were complicit with slavery, colonialism or imperialism. And of course, we can see even that in the 20th century and the 21st century, with Western women supporting the invasion of Afghanistan by US Army, or finding that, Iraqi women will be saved, or Palestinian will be saved, or Iranian women will be saved. Which is not saying that you don't have oppression, but the point is, this question of being saviors also was quite early in the Western feminism. So one thing is very important is to say feminism plural, to also look at what kind of feminism emerged in the Global South, in which way even the notion of equality was formulated there. And quite often, most of the women in the Global South practically from the beginning integrated the question of anti-colonialism. They understood that it was not just that the colonialism was reinforcing, even if there were some patriarchy in their society, colonialism reinforced patriarchy. Absolutely. Wrote laws, imposed laws, and in society in which, for instance, in which you had more negotiation or more possibility, they imposed a very rigorous patriarchal norms in the society. So yes, there is a Western feminism that has been deeply complicit with colonial slavery, with colonialism, imperialism, and to this day, complicit with neoliberalism and imperialism. Absolutely. Absolutely. We can say, one of the situations today, which is for me, the situation that cuts through everything, which is Palestine. And we see that, the complicity of some feminists with the oppressive, state of Israel. There was the UN decade of women's rights by the United Nations, the decade of women, which you can see both, the meeting in Nairobi, in which you had many women from the African continent, the Middle East and Asia, and kind of, for me, my hypothesis, like freak out, the West, because so this way, women of the Global South took over and said, okay, you have done your meeting in Copenhagen and Mexico City, good, okay. But, this is not the only feminism that is there. And, for instance, Angela Davis was there and she said, but, the feminism that, because the delegate for the US was the daughter of Ronald Reagan. And she said, she's not my sister. There's no sisterhood here. She's not my sister. So there was a moment of like need to take over again, to pacify, as I say, some form of pacification in the colonial sense of pacification, of an emerging very strength, not movement, because movement were there, but a force, like a united force from the global south of different, women's group, calling themselves feminist or not. And connected their struggle with anti-imperialism and and also, for instance, for pro-socialism, whatever, not necessarily in the way of the Soviet Union at the time. So that was really a fear. So women's rights had to be again taken and re-pacified, and really becoming at the service of neoliberalism. So that was one thing. The second thing, some of the women in the West, some feminists in the West, by the 1980s, 1990s, they had won a lot of victory, we can say, for instance, for contraception, abortion, divorce. So, real progress, I'm not saying, real progress. So in a way, for instance, the men in power and and the dominant classes and the political parties, okay, things were done with it, let's move further. So for these feminists, like, how can we regain our place? How can we again become important? And they found Islamophobia. They really again talk about women's rights, saying, okay, we have won this, won that, but one thing which is still there and is threatening our victory is Islam. And Islam is not over there, it's here in the West. And so they offer to imperialism and neoliberalism the discourse, that their discourse of women's rights, and it worked, because who is against women's rights, right? And they use the things of little girl at 12 being married at 12, sexual mutilation. They focus on certain things, a veiled woman, polygamy, all these things like that, showing that, oh, look at how this is backward and we could do something. And so it became quite early, absolutely within the international program of the international organization, international foundation, and even state. All program of development, you have to have a chapter for women's equality, for gender equality. It was called women's equality, but quickly gender equality. And if you did not have that included, you will not receive, money, funding, really. And so this, and we can talk about many, many, many things, how this work, how suddenly African women, we have to take care of them, Asian women, Muslim women. It's suddenly, there was a program, documentaries, books, incredible propaganda showing how these women had been, marginalized, oppressed, and it was good to save them. It will be good for development, it will be good for girls, it will be good, for the country itself. So, and what I call a civilizational feminism, I say because that feminism borrowed very really from the discourse of the civilizing mission, which is a French term, but we can say the white man burden in English. This idea that the West is saving the rest of the world. And that animated really the post-slavery colonization. The British were going to save India, Indian women, and all this backwardness, or African continent, or the Muslim society, or whatever. They were going to civilize them, to bring them reason, health, medicine, science, to all these people who had no clue. They will bring them also the idea of democracy, of right, of freedom, because of the rest of the world, apparently of the rest of the planet, had no clue about that. So that civilization, during colonialism, women were feminists, white feminists, were not really strong in that. Even, when I find texts by white feminists defend decolonization, they are not used by the men who are in power. It's quite marginal. The power of white feminists at this time is quite marginal. Their power became very much more powerful by the end of the 20th and the beginning of the 21st. They became an ideological force, but that had very concrete consequences in the programs, in health program, a development program, agricultural program, every program. And you had that shift also about economic shift of also business implant, going to this place in the global south, factories, all these things of, for fashion or all things, or now, digital or whatever, where women were brought in. So the discourse of progress, that all this will bring progress for women, will take them outside of the home, will give them, resources, and so will bring them autonomy that they don't have because of the culture of society, was very, of course, powerful. Because was, like, upon, if you read that, you're for it. You say, okay, that's good, it brings autonomy. That erase what the women in the global south had been fighting for like centuries. We are not just waiting for the white feminists to arrive. It erases also what has been anti-colonial feminism, imperialist feminism in this country, in which women fought for rights, but within the frame of anti-colonialism, liberation from colonialism, which was not just the question of building the nation state, but also how do we develop differently? What will be the school we will have? What will be the university we will have? What kind of public health services we will have? What kind of agriculture, economy we will have? And then after we can talk about what happened in the global south. But this was totally marginalized. Women in the global south were shown as, poor victim, passive, that has to be saved by the rich country. So this is what I call civilizational feminism, which had the roots in, in colonialism and colonization, but then really were able to fulfill a role that, for instance, development has lost, more or less. Armed intervention, where, of course, the West was still doing it, but they were not, seen as civilizing. But these women's rights were perfect. The discourse of women's rights was absolutely perfect, And to this day, we see how strong it is. It has a strength. We cannot deny it. And this was offered by white feminism. As I say in my book, they insisted, they had a very important role in international institution and national institution. They push for Ministry of Women's Rights. They push to have the question of women's rights in foreign policy. All this was absolutely, you see it, and today now it's part of the Western foreign policy. It's part of the, also of economic program, foundation, international foundation or private foundation, absolutely constantly talk about women's rights and girls' rights, constantly. So it has become, the gender equality is about everything now. There is no way you're going to get funding if you don't have in your project a paragraph on gender equality. It has become really a very important weapon in the end of neoliberalism and imperialism. So Sarah Faris, in a wonderful book, talk about effectively both the stigmatization and the need for the economy of this woman, these two things. I will say that civilizing feminism is also about foreign policy. It's not just national policy, it's also foreign policy. It plays to that, so that's also very important. It's part of a really global policy. Okay, that's one thing. The second thing is effectively, the abaya story in France. I will say it reveals many things. It reveals, of course, what Fanon say in one of his articles, like, get the woman and the rest will follow. So you go to a society, you get the woman. You give them things, you say, oh, of course, and so it's men against men. Our patriarchy is a liberal patriarchy. Of course, we have things, progress to make, but we are a liberal patriarchy. We allow our daughter to go to school, to go to the university, and to succeed in the world. That patriarchy, no. So it's not just on the national level for me, it's also on the global level. There is also on the global level today incredible fear from of the black and brown men by the West. There is a criminalization, deep decriminalization of Arab and Black, to call language, to say these terms. They are killed, as we know, by the police. Mostly young Black men in the US, but in Europe, a lot of Arab young men and men. So there is also something being played there that is important. So we just not the woman, and then the obsession of in Europe, more in Europe than elsewhere, with the veil. I mean, the dressing, how women are dressed. I mean, there are examples in the media in the last 2 days which are you wonder if they are becoming crazy. For instance, a color could be seen well, but that color is not really secular. Where did you get that? Who told you that? What is going on? So there is a witch hunt going on. And I would say that is also it answers to an incredible presence of young Muslim, and not just young Muslim women, in France and elsewhere. They are speaking. They are not silent. And they are saying, we are there, and you're going to listen to us. And so that's also a reaction of fear. I mean, because if we look just at the reaction and say, of course, this is totally crazy, stupid, but this is also because these women are speaking. There is absolutely one of the things that powers fear when the subaltern, the oppressed, speak, open their mouth. That is so. It's the answer to that also. Behind that is to see so many young women going to school, going to university, becoming lawyers, becoming doctors, becoming, whatever they become, artists, writers, whatever. And so being strongly there. They're not going to be marginalized. They're not going to be in the margin. And so they have to be sent back. It's also a question of disciplining strongly. There is a lot of fear in the West. We have also to think about that. There is incredible fear of this emerging strength from the global south, and has to be absolutely crushed, because they know that their power is, of course, still there, but not that solid. It's like the foundation are shaking. And so the targeting of on the body of women, and especially Muslim women, is also pure racism, absolutely pure racism. Because we talk, you were right, we're meant to talk about the abaya, but I have another example in Mayotte, which is a French, as they say, overseas department, of the director of the regional health service, which is a very important position. This is a state position. You direct all the health services in the region. Declare in June that all the women coming to the public hospital will be sterilized. Who are the women in Mayotte? They are Black and they are Muslim. And this connects to the whole racist ideology of these women are making too many children, and this is because then the society is poor and underdeveloped. That, and also who has the right to have children and who deserve to be born. This targeting of the Muslim body, the female body, is pure racism, absolute structural racism. It's not just, we don't, they are oppressed, they wear long dress because their father, brother, whomever require it. It's really to reassert colonial domination, colonial racial domination. It's really through this absolutely absurd thing of a fairly young girl being sent back to their house because they refuse to change their clothes is really, if we could compare movement of repression, of state repression, when the colonized society is raising their head, you have to strike back. And this, I will say, it's really right now what we see. And of course, we see it very clearly because despite what the French state is doing, they are still opening, they are still speaking, they are still making themselves heard. They're right. And this is absolutely incredible because they are losing some ground. And feminists, white bourgeois feminists are totally complicit, absolutely complicit, really. There is, if you want, also the fear of the loss of hegemony, of ideological hegemony. It's economic, but it's also that the fact that they understand people don't listen to them very much. What they are saying do not have the same power as it used to have. It's over, and that's so there is a loss of opposition, and we should not underestimate the fear that this produces, the loss of a position of power. And so they react, of course, through violence. I mean, because this is being a violence. I mean, the interdiction of the abaya is a violence, is a systemic violence. So, and also, it's also being played, they are now confronted also by Muslim state with power, and what do they do with that? I mean, the West is really confronted on many fronts by different forces, not all the same, but that is challenging the foundation of its power. So effectively, the work of cleaning is absolutely necessary. No society, not just in the West, will function without the work of cleaning by mostly women, but also in some instance for some job by some men, like for example Dalit in India or elsewhere. So the connection. So for me also, it's the connection, the colonial racial division, which was made between being clean and dirty. What is cleanliness? And the norm of cleanliness are bourgeois and white, as if non-bourgeois, non-white do not know what is clean. And so these norms were imposed on our society by the West, not looking how people, what are the notion of cleanliness, and what is to be clean. And we know all the program about hygiene in this society where people do not know what is to be, what was hygiene. So that has been really, for me, through that, and this is in my more recent work, looking again at the distinction, the racial colonial distinction, clean, dirty. And so, to go back to your question, the work is the people doing that work are invisible, must not be seen. So this is why they do it very early in the morning or late at night. But their work has to be visible. The work has to be visible. If I enter in my office, I am a CEO, and it's dirty, I see it, and I cannot see that. I must just constantly see cleanliness. So the work has to be seen, the result. Making no, but the result is very important. If I am, because we are trained, so when we enter in a room, we expect the room to be clean, whether it's a university, a movie theater, what do I know, hospital, whatever. We expect it to be. So when it's not, this is what becomes visible, and this is what becomes then scandalous. Because then, why it's threatening health. Of course, it's a threat to health or even to aesthetics, whatever. So that the way the bourgeois society, the white bourgeois society built that, and they built it even in the West, again, the popular classes, they connected it with the smell, and it was a whole construction between the clean smell, clean and smelling, like no smell, whatever. That was the ideal. And then you had the what has to be disciplined and worked through, the unclean, smelly. And the division, as for instance, we can talk about Fanon, but also many other, I don't want also to quote Fanon, that is also how the colonial space was being built. right? You will go to the colonial city, you will see tree, flowers will be beautiful, beautiful house, and you will go to the colonial city, and the trash will not be picked up. You will not have park, green park, and so on and so forth. So that division was partial, was specialized. So there was a segregation, which was not necessarily in the way it has been in apartheid, really clearly, but that was even, in any city of the world today. So that work effectively, this has to be, as I say, invisible, but the result must be visible. So that's a very division. And this has not been really, I will dare to say, looked at by white feminists. The white feminists look at housework and the fact that men do not share it enough, they don't do enough laundry and they don't pick up the garbage, whatever. But by concentrating about the housework, you don't look at effectively the fact of all this caring, cleaning, how cleaning is about caring and caring about cleaning, in the way that build deep inequities, deep injustices. So then after you can, in some white circle, idolize caring or care is feminism, women care and whatever, and you don't look at the way in which the care has been also fabricated as a source, as a terrain of exploitation and extraction of the emotional, but also of the life force. I mean, you are exhausted. All the women who do that will tell you they are exhausted. They are constantly exhausted. And their body is being damaged quite quickly, because they are carrying babies, elderly, things to clean, whatever, up and down, and it's heavy. So it's really care is an economy of extraction of energy, of force, and that effectively has a very concrete consequence on health, stress, fatigue, and everything like that. And so that is it sustains society, and it cannot. I will dare to say that. Of course, we have to fight for the recognition of that work, and for instance, we really have to fight for incredible salary, not just decent salary. If that work is indispensable, they should be paid as well as engineers or whatever whomever is considered as valuable. So we have still to fight for that recognition of their work, good pay, not just recognition. They have to be paid. They get to have also to be able to retire at 45, because you cannot do it more than later than 40. So it has to be looked at incredibly important work for now. But then also, and this is my recent work, is like, as decolonial, we have also to go further. What will be cleaning in a decolonial society? When we have dismantled racism and capitalism, what will be cleaning? What will be cleaning once it has been freed from the norm, the white bourgeois racist norm? What will it be? What will be caring once we are getting free from the white bourgeois norm of caring, which are extraction and exploitation and dispossession? What will be? So there is the struggle today. That work, support union, support the struggle, go to the picket line, make that incredible exploitation known, challenge the women who hire domestic, a servant or nurses or whatever. How much do you pay them? How much do you pay them? It's not just I give them my children clothes at Christmas for their kids. No, 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 no. How much do you pay? How often do they have vacation, right? I mean, do you, whatever. And then are you sure we should fight as feminists so they can retire at 45 or 50 or whatever, but we have to talk with them. They will tell us. There was one woman with whom I was talking. She said she resigned. She went to see her boss and he offered her a good sum, but in my eyes was not much, but for her was a lot. But she told me, I am 54. I cannot take my grandchild in my arms. I'm so weak. I have, my arm has become so weak because of the work I did. She was 55. That should not be. So that is a struggle. Because through that struggle, we will show, as you were saying, that this is absolutely indispensable. Leftists, whatever, we have to understand that. And that is a really important struggle, a very important struggle. It's an anti-racist, anti-capitalist, feminist struggle. It's really, and not just housework. Again, as I say, it's not just housework, because housework, the way it's seen is, individual, at home, in the home, and of course has to change. I agree with that. But what I mean is, like, outside, you can effectively decide that your home will be, you will not clean your place. You don't care, or you're going to clean it, once every 2 months. It's up to you. After all, why not? But when you go out, you don't want to enter in a shop, you don't want to enter to go to school, to the university, or whatever you go, or pharmacy, whatever, which is not clean. That's what I'm talking about. That's part of the economy upon which the society rests. That basement, if we want to have an architecture, metaphor. And then after you have all the floor above. And that we have to put really to light what's happening in the basement. That one. So caring, we have to be careful. Caring is also, because it has been idolized also, we care, whatever. It's also a part of a source of exploitation and extraction and dispossession. And this is why I will go back to, to just what I say. It's not just about recognition, like, oh, we recognize them and expand rights that are in the law. It's really to look at the fact that this work is deeply rooted in exploitation. It's not like working in a factory or even in a plantation. It's not like, and the case you are giving, you give, is also, they are isolated in different houses, whatever. So how do you organize? Because effectively, if they were, but it's also very difficult. The strike of women, of cleaners, are always extremely difficult. Or, it's much more difficult than we think. It's not even just because, for instance, they work in the same hotel that is easy. It's a work deeply structured, organized in a way to isolate people, to isolate the workers, whether it's housework or even outside. It's very difficult. So this is, again, the idea that through rights, through the inscription in right, we're going to resolve things. And the fact not to see that effectively capitalist and patriarchal society always find a way to go around the law, go around the social law. And so also putting the fabrication of this woman in the vulnerability in which, the racial, the racism and capitalism put them. So they will go to work, because otherwise, there is no food on the table, and kids cannot go to school, or even they cannot afford, for instance, to rent a place. So this is where we have to fight. This is where to fight. First, effectively, is how we organize these women who are isolated. What is the form of organization? Because they cannot be found in the same place. It's not like you go to the factory or to the, whatever, or to even a commercial mall and you look at, the woman at the car, who are selling things, it's not, or, who are cashiers or whatever. How do you organize? And this is why we have to imagine more, because the organization of struggle has been, most of them, the tactic and strategy have been born from a place in which people are together. And this is a place where people are not together. So which means a total different way of structuring, a total way also, because they cannot strike by themselves, they're going to lose their job, if they refuse. So we have to enter that, and all this difficulty and all this obstacle that society, the structure, the social structure, have put to hinder the organization, the collective organization, and reinvent what we do. There are a lot of jobs like that. Effectively, there are domestic jobs, taking care of children, taking care of the elderly, all this care, what is called care work, or work where women are very often isolated and have incredible difficulty to organize collectively, so that they are, through that organization and through that protest, something is being, they make that visible again, For instance, when I say, for instance, strike by cleaners in a hotel, it's right away visible. Rooms are not made, so client cannot get in the room or whatever. So what will be the form of struggle that will make the exploitation visible? That will make that form of domination and exploitation visible. What will be? So it will be also to target not only the women who work, but the people who employ. You can target, it's like targeting the boss. You can target the boss, because effectively otherwise people will always find ways to go around the laws and to feed on the precariousness and vulnerability that capitalism and racism have produced. When we talk about white women, I will say that for them to understand, to join, for instance, the decolonial feminism, will be to ask themselves why they became white, when and why they became white. What is whiteness for them? What whiteness brought them? And not just I receive it, I did not choose it. That's not the point. It was, Europe which invented whiteness. Nobody had invented whiteness. Just read the historian. There are many stories about that. How Europe became white. When the white were invented, and how whiteness was important. So I will say for white women, would be already not to renounce whiteness. To renounce whiteness, and not just guilt or oh my God, I don't want to be, and so on. I'm sorry. That we does not. Guilt has nothing to do, and we don't need guilt. We need people with strength and courage. So I will say, yeah, the first thing we'll say, what made you white, and what in whiteness? What do you invest in whiteness? Are you really invested in it? Not necessarily in terms, oh my God, I don't want to be white, I will not want to be. No, whiteness is not just your skin color. It's the place that you occupy in the world, thanks to something perhaps you did not participate in, but that you receive as an inheritance. And and you have to refuse that inheritance if you want to be effectively with other people. So that will say that, because otherwise there will be no possibility. And because also, as I said at the beginning, among feminists in the West, you had feminists who renounced whiteness, who were who took the side of the colonized in the anti-colonial struggle or anti-imperialist struggle. So what would be again internationalism? What is international feminism today? What if you are white? What is to be internationalist? What is it? How do you express your solidarity with women? Not just, by effectively going back to the savior syndrome we talk about, but really. So you live in Europe, let's say, you live in Western Europe. What is this country about? You are part, you're a citizen. So let's say you live in France, as I am living right now. What is France? France is also one of the most important producers of weapons in the world, and one of the most important seller of weapons in the world. The second, I think. Okay. So weapons are not used to bring peace in the world, right? It's not, and it's also a form of weapon. So so I'm a white person, let's say, and this is my state, the state of which I'm a citizen. So that state is part of the machine of imperialism and exploitation and capitalism. So where do I attack it also? as a white person, let's say, where's the place, And so, for instance, I could lead a campaign against the production of weapons. I could attack the factory. It's a big. When we say it's the biggest, one of the second producer of weapons in the world, we have to understand what that means. We have to understand that drones, bomb, everything that kill people everywhere around the world, and are sold to repressive regime or dictatorship. So these are what I mean by that you have concrete things to do. It's not just I'm going to support you. No, what can you do also? What can you do? That also perhaps that you can do as a citizen of that country. That not a migrant or refugee will be able to do so easily. What can you do? What can you do to dismantle the institution and the structure of your country that contribute to the exploitation and racism and dispossession? What are you doing against that? Your country, if I stay in France, but we could talk about England or Denmark or Germany, whatever. What is it? This state is a state that is absolutely, sending troops, sending army in the African continent, in Afghanistan, is friend with the state of Israel. So this is the country in which we live. As a white person, whatever. So, but as a person who want to no longer be a white person in the sense that whiteness give you, your place in the world, you have things to do. Because the more you will weaken the power of the French imperialist state, you will contribute to the liberation of others. So that's how, what is it, So it's not an abstract sisterhood or, let's join. It's really concretely. And then also the fact that, yes, for instance, go back to your example of the abaya. It's not to wear an abaya to be, I will go also out with an abaya, although we could do that, a woman could go out with abaya, that we make. But it's okay. What do I do, to absolutely so that not just saying girls have the right, to use the liberal argument, it's my body, myself. I have the right to do things. It's not just that, because that's, of course, the young girl have absolutely the right to do that. But as feminist and as, trying to think and trying to bring, that is not the argument. It's just this, you are an Islamophobic state, and we will fight against Islamophobia. We will not use the thing, my body, myself, have the right. Because then we fall into the things, but in Iran, but yes, in Saudi Arabia, and we don't even know no longer what we talk about. No, we will say, okay, this is an Islamophobic state, and we will fight against it. So it's also, what are the arguments? How do you situate yourself constantly in front of a struggle? How do you formulate your opposition to something that the state is doing? It's not just a question of opinion, and also to be careful about the trap of liberalism. Again, to what we discussed earlier, a certain feminism saying it's about just, I want, be all what I want to be, in the world. This is not true. There is no possibility, there is no freedom. We are living in a world of unfreedom. This is not, it's not the famous free world, it's a world of unfreedom. So the point, I want to be free to dress as I want. Yes, why not? That's an argument. But the point is that the liberal argument, that we always find a limit from the state. So that's a part of tactical, we can say at one point, to use, but it's not a strategy, a long-term strategy. Because they have captured the idea of free and freedom. So we have to reinvest what is freedom for us and what is to be free. And it's not to just, I go out as I want, I dress as I want, and so on. No, freedom is the end of capitalism, racism, imperialism, all form of exploitation and domination. That's freedom. And so freedom today is being experienced or lived when we fight. That's the moment of freedom, the space of freedom, the autonomous, space, the space of liberation or the space of freedom, not the way, the freedom to be dressed as I want only. For me, feminism can only be anti-racist, anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, and therefore anti-patriarchy. And then, of course, from there are many, 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 many things that can be said. And as you were saying, that point, this basis, let's say, this basic formulation will be expressed and translated in different way from one place to the other. Or indigenous women will want to fight for the right to land more than, for instance, just the right to, or the right. I mean, and when I say right to land, I'm not just saying in the liberal sense, but effectively anti-colonial sense of the land that has been taken from them, that has been stolen. Not taken, but stolen for them. So the way in which after this anti-racist, anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist are being worked out, this is what women will choose on the ground, and we have to respect it. We cannot tell them, oh, you should be already there, that's not the right, the good way. No, that's it. All this form of, all this from different way that structure are being attacked, that's good. That's for me, there is no one better than the other. There is not. There is a multiplicity of attacking and dismantling this regime, this structure. So there is not just one. But I will say yes, perhaps that principle, because the way in which a certain feminism is more obsessed with patriarchy. Of course, I'm not for patriarchy, but patriarchy was rationalized and is still rationalized. That is, you can be, a patriarch at home and being absolutely, someone, your daughter, your son, and your wife just dreaming that you drop dead, like at one point because you're terrible. But when you go out, you're a black man, an Arab man, an indigenous man. It's not. You will not have the same right. I mean, we knew under colonialism they did not have the same right as a white patriarch about private property, inheritance, work, way to be private, being in the world. So that is continuing. Men, black, Arab, indigenous men are not just men in the sense. And here we can, the way even the notion of human, as the philosopher Sylvia Winter has said, human has been invented by Europe. They are the only human, almost. So the human are still to be invented. And men and women, what we want as men, women, or other gender, whatever, does not matter, is still we still have to. We don't have the word yet for them. We are fighting, but the word is not still that word. And there is this notion by South African activists in the township of humanizing the world. Making the world finally human is not there yet. So, despite what the West is saying about humanism, being human, humanity, we are working for humanity, universal humanity, blah, 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 blah. No, there is no. We are not there yet. We still have to fight for that. So I will say this notion of humanizing the world is quite powerful because it raises a lot of questions, and especially today with the climate disaster, what is the planet we want? Racial capitalism, imperialism have fabricated a planet which is practically uninhabitable for billions of people in the world. It's really concretely. What we saw in Pakistan 2 years ago with, the incredible 50 Celsius degree, what we see, the flood here, this is important. The planet is uninhabitable, is irrespirable for billions of people. So it's very concrete. It's really a struggle for life against an economy of death. So for me, feminists, decolonial feminists have to be, on that side of the struggle. If it's just, yes, just for women's rights, okay. But, that uh, um, capitalism as it is, now is absolutely taking us to the abyss. So that's, we have to be with the people who are fighting every day. And so we are really, to go back to what you say, constantly supporting the multiplicity of movement of resistance. We have to bring them also, very important, to say, look what is being done. People are not passive. People are not just like waiting in the corner. They are constantly fighting in very, perhaps not spectacular ways, but they're there. They're there. So it's also not a feminism of the spectacular necessarily, which does not mean we don't need to invade the street and occupy the street and attack the institution, but that, and also less spectacular, uh, perhaps a form of struggle. There has been such a long, struggle about that, and so many movements, so many women have been confronted with that within revolutionary movement, armed movement of decolonization. Everywhere, in union, in leftist movement, in political parties, and it has not stopped. There is no, has not stopped. So yes, who is talking? Who are the hero? Even, mostly we know many names of men and very few names of women, and we do it. So this is absolutely, yeah, this is what it goes, and all of us, and for instance, I have seen it and I've been against it quite often, of men not taking you seriously, or not, thinking that, oh my God, whatever. It's endless. It's incredible. Um, it's incredible. Even when you fight, they will tell. So what to do? What to do? To both not to fall into the civilizing feminism, to call this that way, or also to leave the struggle, or to accept this situation, because you do have also violent situation. I was reading texts that were published in the early 70s for an essay I wrote about anti-imperialist literature in the feminist publishing house in France in the 70s. And it's mostly from South America and Central America. A lot of women being, in the armed struggle. All of them talk about the way their problem, their issue, the question they raise, or their remark were not taken seriously, were not even listened to. And for instance, they were in prison, they were sent to prison and they were tortured. But the testimony of torture and about being in jail by men were more important than what they were saying. So this is not from today. This is way back an argument. And the women were totally aware of that. But they stay, for instance, in the struggle sometimes, because, most of the time, because the struggle, there was an urgency, but they remain absolutely, looking back, they say, but this was there and this was not resolved. So most of the time, effectively, it's not resolved. And women either get exhausted and leave the struggle of that movement, or they try to convince the man that is important, but quite often also they get burned out. So I will say that it's a constant negotiation, but there are moments, perhaps also. How can I say that? There are moments in which perhaps not. Sorry, I need to formulate that better. There are certainly moments in which a woman in a movement, where men are acting, are sexist, misogynist, or in a patriarch way, where they have really to be perhaps much confronting much, really clearly. Are you still, are you going to remain like that? Because we're going to leave the movement. Because as you were saying, there is a certain blackmail sometimes. Stay, because otherwise you are weakening the movement. But then the woman is carrying all the burden, and she has to shut up. She has to shut up, sexual violence from the leader, you don't say that because, as you say, we don't clean, the laundry in public. But this is not cleaning the laundry. The guy is, acting absolutely as awfully as the enemy. So there are moments, you have to confront that, I will say. Really to confront that. And then there are moments also, but okay, you say, okay, I will wait for a while because now, for instance, it's very dangerous moment. It's not the moment to do that. But I don't think you have to remain silent. This is what I mean. The principle, for me, the basic principle, no silence at one point. Because as you were saying, it will weaken the struggle. At the end of the day, it will weaken the struggle. So the fact that men in this movement are still not totally aware that they are, weakening, and we saw it. We observe it every day. Movement falling apart, burn out by activists because of that, because of the lack of understanding what's happening. But I will say also that in this movement, we are confronted both with a desire to change the world and the desire to change ourselves. On the other side, there is no need to change themselves. That's not a point for them. It's not an objective. What they want is to preserve their position. So, of course, they also fight ideologically. They write. They are not just passive, right? But the point is, we want to do many things at the same time. If we use the notion of decolonization, we want to decolonize the world, the collective, and ourselves. So we put ourselves in a much more difficult, if I may say difficult in the sense of less complacent than the conservative woman, right? We don't need to deconstruct ourselves if we want to use that term, right? Whereas we know that it's not enough to change outside, because if we don't change ourselves, we will repeat, the same problem. So it's both of an incredible strength, and it can be a weakness, because effectively on the other side, they don't need to do that. And also the system of oppression exhausts us. Being an activist is a lot of work. They have all the weapon, the power as a weapon, media, school, university, cinema, TV, everything. And we have the strength is our ideas, our imagination, our capacity to imagine something else and to put our body there. So, but not necessarily sometimes. It can be a poem, a song that really, mobilize our imagination. This is our strength. But effectively, the decolonization of oneself, the decolonization of collective work, being among very different people, coming from different backgrounds with different way, and that create conflict. And how do we resolve the conflict so we don't fall into the self-destructive, paranoid or whatever, everything that happened in movement, and we have enough testimony, so I don't enter the detail. We have to create space of negotiation and resolution of this. We cannot put them under the rug constantly. We have to find a way which are not also through expelling the person or making that person feeling so bad that person leave totally, and isolated, or, all the practices that have existed rather than confronting the situation. I'm not talking about transforming ourselves into judge and making some tribunal with, but effectively say, okay, this is how can we resolve that question? Okay, what is happening? Can we talk about it? Can we find a way of dealing with that? And so we don't go We don't need the police, we don't need the tribunal, but and we don't need to expel people or to make people, feeling terrible. How do we do justice? What are the form of justice we are already inventing, so that there is also some of this abuse, because some of them are real violent abuse, are treated. And this is absolutely something which is absolutely important, because effectively it's also something that can destroy some movement or some collective that explode because of a situation. Or then you learn later that terrible abuse have happened, and then it also serves the reaction to say, look what happened, look at these people, and so on. So I will say, be conscious that we are living in a world in which division is totally encouraged by power, dividing us, dividing our movement, or look at the whatever. So division has been the very important strategy, and it works. So they're not going to give it up. And also we have to work on our own feelings of resentment. Why is she the leader? Why not me? We have also to look at ourselves, that we are not neutral or just nice people always just because we are on the revolutionary side. We can be jealous, bitter, resentful, what do I know, or the feeling. So how do we treat this feeling? Not in the kind of a, self-help manner, but really as political question that we have to deal with, because these are political questions which will be even there once we get rid, the day we will get rid of all this regime of oppression. So this was something that existed. We see it in the text of Cabral, or the text of Angela Davis, or the text of Fanon. There is absolutely an understanding that this can be the greatest enemy. We read it. We read it also in the text of the Black Panther. The Black Panthers themselves say how they were weakened by effectively movement of the FBI, the incredible thing, but they fell into it, and so it was important to understand what happened, why they believe that effectively the comrade was a comrade. I'd say things like that, how we are able to absorb something, to believe something that, of course, yes, and certainly, want to talk to the police. How do we accept this, this, the poison, power use poison every day? What are the strategy of, defending ourselves against all this poisoning? But we have to look at ourselves, but not in a manner, like goes to some of self-help things which are part of the pacification of neoliberalism. But we have, and we have to look at movement who dealt with that. I mean, of course, Fanon is the most well-known, so I quote him, but I don't want also to give everything to Fanon. But the question of mental health, as we say, was treated by the guerrilla movement, in some leftist movements. So we have to go back to that, What is our form of, what is the decolonial psychology, decolonial psychoanalysis, in the sense that we know that we can be also mobilized by bad feeling, as we say, by feeling that are destructive and negative. And that is not just to repress them and say, no, I am, because I'm a revolutionary, I'm a good person. No, I can have also things. So how do I deal with that? And I will again, finally say that the creation of collective practices that deal with burnout, mental problem, or conflict without a movement have to be developed. What again is to acknowledge that capitalist society need the work of caring and cleaning by women of color mostly, and also some men of color. That work is exploited, but the result has to be visible, constantly visible, otherwise the people are punished. If it's not visible, that has to be made. And this, as I say, could be, the pillar of society. So that has to be at the center. Because if we just, let's say again, I take the image of architecture, of a building. If we just care about the floor, the first floor, second floor, third floor, and not the basement, but the basement will still remain the site of exploitation, And so we have tended to look at, what is above, the ground, like what, but the under the ground has been also the site of extraction constantly. Like extracting from, extracting what is deep inside, So we could look at, the image, the metaphor of mining, which has been so important for capitalism, of accumulation of silver, gold, and of course coal and everything, as well as I do. So that it's mining the life force of someone until that person is exhausted. And then, another person come to replace. That is really at the heart of exploitation. Really, the image is not metaphor, but reality, but of extracting the life force. Capitalism and colonization work like that. You exhaust something, okay, the forest has been cleared, the mine has been, exhausted, or people have died. We move further down and we open a new mine, or we, exploit a new forest or exploit new people, right? And you leave behind wasted land, damaged soil, damaged environment that the damage linger for generation, and you move. So you damage and damage and damage, and then you leave the cleaning to other people. You need the cleaning of the new place of exploitation, and you leave, the impossible almost cleaning of the wasted land that capitalism left behind. So the question of cleaning and caring has to be at the heart, I will say, because it's not just about the broom in a place. It's about the fact that capitalism and colonialism produce wasted land and wasted body, produce waste, does not produce, has no value whatsoever in the sense of, social value. So if we want to do effective put, as you say, the question of cleaning, caring as a center, as effectively as long as we do not answer to that question of what will replace that, how we will have a society that functions but without this extraction, I think is an important question, even more so because of the climate disaster today, even more so. I will just, I don't want to enter too much in my next book because it's my next book and I cannot, just talk about it. But I started from, how can I say, the basic need of a society. So cleaning is a basic need, So what will be that basic need? How it will be fulfilled in a post-racist, post-capitalist, post-patriarchal society? And so, which means that we will need that will, of course, the production of wasting will no longer be that. But nonetheless, how we will do, so all this, how do we again, as I said before, how do we free ourselves from the white bourgeois norm of caring and cleaning? And as I said, so we rethink caring and cleaning. And we take care about the elemental needs of people, of the fact that, for instance, caring and cleaning are not just site of exploitation, which is what capitalism and racism has done, but it's also what we need as human beings and that we need in this planet. Babies cannot survive by themselves. Elderly need help. We need help. We are social beings. I need people to take care of me, which doesn't mean that they care of me as a nurse, but they care, that I feel that they care about me. I need to live in a planet that is not being destroyed, where I can breathe, I can have access to clean water, which is a total privilege in the world today. Very few people on this planet open a tap and can drink the water. It's absolutely exceptional. It's totally just for some people in the West. So these are, for instance, this is about caring, the caring that is political and not just affective. You see, is about the politics of that. The fact that we are social beings and we need to be cared about, and we need to care about people, but we need also to care about our environment. And the fact of the caring is totally, how can I say, hindered constantly because of the constant destruction and the constant saving that we have to do of the little, that can be saved, so that there is still some care, which means that we can breathe, that we can love, that we can take care of people around us, that people also around us can take care of ourselves, and we take care of the plant, the animal, the planet, everything that make that world a world. So again, it's a question of humanizing the world. I will want to say also, that again, to this living, caring, I mean, the politics of life, again, the politics of death, and again, turning to indigenous, Black people living in township, or the Arab, or the migrant and refugee who are crossing, like, surviving in terrible way. Is like, what is, the living communizing that we have to do, the solidarity also, the importance of solidarity, of concrete solidarity, for me is also part of the politics of today, reviving the solidarity. I mean, what I mean is like the anti-refugee, anti-migrant politics in the West are for me absolutely something, also a target to fight against.